Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We're the Skeleton Crew, and we are back with our patron Q&A videos. We appreciate all of you guys being patient with your questions that all of our patrons have submitted. As you guys know, October is a really busy time of the year for us because we have our big national conference, or international conference, the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting. And this year, we have had a couple of other events associated with that. We gave a panel in the virtual Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting. And
some of us gave two.
Some of us gave two panels. And we did a series of fundraising live streams to raise money for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology Futures Award that supports undergraduates from historically underrepresented groups in the geosciences who are pursuing their first undergraduate research opportunities. It's a really important fundraiser. We are not sure when this video will release, but perhaps it will release before November 25th of 2023. And if it does, the fundraiser is still open. And if you haven't donated yet, we'd appreciate if you think about donating to support the future of paleontology and making sure that it becomes a more accessible and equitable field for the next generation of paleontologists. In the interest of time, because it's very late and we just recorded a video about Dilophosaurus that took us over 2 hours, because boy howdy is there a lot to say about that little crested guy, we're going to move right into it. But first I should remind you that I'm Dr. James Napoli. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
My name is Amelia.
And North Carolina State University.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
It's too late for this. My day has been way too long for this kind of shenanigan to happen.
I know.
Only one.
I'm sorry.
Again.
Literally got the stress release tea happening here.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's
He's
okay.
not really.
My name is Amelia Zillo. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
My name is Scott Johnston, and I am the Vertebrate Paleontology Fossil Preparator and Technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology.
Alex Rubenstahl, Yale.
Dalton Meyer, the Yale University PhD candidate. Together.
Skeleton
We're the
Crew.
Skeleton Crew.
We're the Skeleton Crew. That was one of our worst sync-ups. Yes.
It's question. You asked. We answered.
Yeah.
You
time.
summoned. We came.
To quote Christian Bale on the set of Terminator Salvation, give me a f***ing answer! And we will.
Jesus!
Hey, he's a passionate man.
He is.
And apparently verbally abusive to stuff.
All right.
Shall we dive in?
Yes, let's dive
does
in.
he care who
Dive
reads the
right
questions? Or do
I
we
think
wanna
Dalton
rotate?
assembled this document, so I think maybe he should be the moderator for tonight.
I might just do that.
All right, go for it. You also have the first answer, so that works out.
Yeah. So we're going to be going in a bit of an order just because of the way we structured this. It's not... It's pure happenstance the way this turned out, so that's just how it is. But we're going to start with our questions from September. We do, as James mentioned, apologize for missing September's release in October, but October was just too busy for us. So we're combining September and October into one video. But from September, SwampApe originally asked us about our favorite species of lizard, then realized that we had addressed that in the prior Q&A video. And so SwampApe has amended his question and given us a new question, which is, what non-avian dinosaur species would you like to work with in a captive zoological capacity? If you're stuck on dinosaurs, you can go throughout the Paleozoic for fun. My answer to this is I would love to say a sauropod because they're big and cool and I want to see one so bad. But if I think about an animal I'd want to work with and kind of develop a keeper kind of relationship with, I would say some kind of hadrosaur. And my reasoning for this is because they seem to have pretty well developed parental care behavior, which would indicate to me that the young have the potential to imprint upon someone. And so if you could raise one from a hatchling, you might actually be able to develop somewhat of kind of a cool bond with this animal. And then it would get large enough to be able to ride. I know zookeepers don't traditionally ride their animals, but this is my happy scenario, and I think it'd be very cool. Alex, would you like to share your answer?
Yes. Sauropod, I think, is probably the correct answer. And I would take my chances imprinting on it, and I would also try to ride it. But I think also maybe a Microraptorine could be a fun little guy, or some like a Noasaur, which is weird enough that it doesn't just feel like a ground bird. They have good energy.
Yeah.
James.
So I think, I mean, I love microraptorines in general. I'd love to interact with one. I feel like they'd be kind of fun because they'd be fairly smart. But I imagine that Psittacosaurus, any species of it, but perhaps especially Psittacosaurus amataba, because it would understand that I'm its mother, I think would be fun little guys. And if they aren't fun little guys, they would be absolutely terrifying rage demons.
Like
kind of like how red pandas are one of the more dangerous animals to interact with in captivity because...
What?
Scott, you're muted. Well, I mean, they're really, really nasty. Like, you need to wear falconry gloves when you... Yeah.
Didn't I tell you this? I told
Yes.
somebody
Did you
this.
tell me
You
this?
Yes.
you told us this, Amelia.
Yeah,
I think at
James,
the
were you
zoo.
at the zoo when I was telling this?
It might have been then.
Because this
I think
is
so,
almost
'cause
like-
I learned it
we had
recently.
this verbatim moment earlier. Like I think
Okay. I'm
because
sorry.
I was telling whoever was with me at the zoo about what I heard from a keeper at the Milwaukee Public Zoo who was
That's
hanging
it.
out by the red pandas, and she was like, because you know, like visitors were there, like, oh my god, they're so cute. She's like, uh-huh.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel like. That's the energy Psittacosaurus gives to me. Like, yeah, come, I've got these big eyes. I'll make the doe eyes at you, and if you try to touch me, I will bite your finger off. And I like that. I want to know what they were like. So probably one of those.
See, I could also see them, or possibly I was also thinking before I answered this question of maybe one of the other small ceratopsians, like
Protoceratops?
Protoceratops or something, because I know that apparently I've heard before that some of the smaller like pig species, like red river hogs, are just some of the most delightful animals to ever interact with, period. Like, they're just wonderful little critters, and I think that those might be nice. But I do really like Dalton's argument of like smaller, or maybe a small-ish hadrosaur. I think that they would be delightful.
I think you guys are like going up to like being a little conservative here. Like we're assuming that this is a situation in which we understand these animals like we do modern ones. They're being kept in a zoo, and we know how to interact with them safely. Like, obviously, I would want to work with something big and cool. Like, either like personally, I really like abelisaurs. I think they're very stupid looking, but in a good way. So either like an abelisaur or like ceratopsians. I really, really like ceratopsians. So like, yeah, they're dangerous, but like so are buffalo, and we keep those. So are elephants. We have those. Granted, they're smart, but like, it's not like we don't know how to be safe around large, dangerous animals in a zoo setting today. And in the spirit of the question, which is very open-ended, I will make that assumption and say something fun, something
Cool.
big and cool.
Excellent.
I like all those answers. Our next question comes from DaikaijuMania, who asks, what about the crew's favorite potentially dubious species? Now, these are dubious creatures of ill repute, but we approach them with an open hand and let them eat gently from it. My answer to this is Stygimoloch. I think it's a really cool looking animal. I think it's a really cool name for a really cool looking animal. And if you're ever at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, in their prehistoric journey exhibit, part of the walkthrough, they've got several dioramas. And one of the dioramas is a Hell Creek ecosystem in which all of the leaves on the trees have been handmade to match leaves from the fossil record of the Hell Creek.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's insanely well produced. Probably the best Hell Creek diorama you can get in terms of authenticity. It's got a little water feature running through it. There's a Triceratops skull from a recently dead Triceratops. And there are two Stygimolochs just kind of bashing into each other. And there's such good models. I might throw up a picture here, but copyright may prohibit that.
It shouldn't. It's a
if it's a
public
picture I
museum.
took, yeah, I'll throw up a picture here. You can see it. That's my answer, Stygimoloch.
Good answer, Dalton. My answer to this question is that the great truth of the universe is that there are no dubious species in the fossil record. They're all real. You can believe. They're just not diagnostic yet. We'll find more. No, in a more serious answer, and this is a little bit derivative of Dalton's, but also Dracorex, because that's a good name. That's a cool name for a dinosaur. It's a cool looking dinosaur, and it's its own thing. And I don't care what Jack Horner says.
My favorite dubious genus is actually not like one of these Pachycephalosaurus ontogomorphs because, well, first of all, I do hope that they're valid, but I really, really love the name of Ogrunolocucpicensis. I really like the growing trend in our field to name fossils after languages that are spoken by the peoples who live in the area where the fossils are found. And I know that the team that described Ugrunaluk did work a lot with the Inupiat people to come up with a name for the fossil in Inupiaq that sounds good and is descriptive and is what people would call it, which I think is a really important thing rather than like, you don't want to just do something lazy and just like Google a translation and just say that's going to be the name. You want to work with people so that what would you call this if you found it, right? And I think that that's a really wonderful thing. I like how different phonologically it is because there's a huge divergence linguistically between Native American languages and basically all quote unquote old world languages. And so they sound so different than a lot of like Western languages, certainly the Latin and Greek names that we hear a lot. And so I like the uniqueness. Like Ugrunaluk is just such a different kind of thing to hear. So I like it, but it appears to have fallen victim to the encroachment of the genus Edmontosaurus onto every duck-billed dinosaur taxon from the latest Cretaceous of North America. So it's a shame. Anyway, Ugrunaluk.
Mine is also not going to be a Pachycephalosaurid ontogomorph. Mine would be Augustinia, which is an incredibly poorly known Rebecca-saurid that for a while was hypothesized to have these like thyreophoran like armor and spikes going down its back and tail and stuff. And it is just such a cool looking animal in that form. And it is kind of a shame to me that more recent studies have shown that it probably didn't even have armor like that. Like the spikes that were associated with it kind of don't match what we would expect for osteoderms, or like the structures that are associated with whatever. It's very, very, very fragmentary and probably would have looked like a regular sauropod. So it makes me sad that we can't have big spiky sauropod. So that would be mine.
Good answer.
It's a good one. Amelia.
Okay, I'm not muted. I'm trying to think. Part of me wants to say the entirety of Cledastes. Because nobody knows what's going on with that animal. But also I'm thinking, I have two real answers. One of them is it's an old name for Cledastes that I found in the Yale collection. It was Adestosaurus rex, which I thought was great. It's great to say. Yeah, no, I love that one. And honestly, there's another dubious Cledastes species that I really like is either Adestosaurus or Cledastes velix. Like, I like velix as a species epithet. I don't know what it means, but it sounds cool. And then my other answer would be Geosternbergia, because it's great. It's perfect. Genera are fake, so it doesn't matter. It can be real to me.
A good answer.
I would like to just note for Amelia that Latin velox or velox is fast.
So that's so much better. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Okay. Our next question comes from the man with no name. If you could own any prehistoric animal as a house pet, assuming that it's an animal which could be feasibly cared for by a single person, what animal would it be and what would you name it? Mine would be a Lystrosaurus named Reginald.
That's very good. Mine would be, as asked every time, Simasuchus, and the Simasuchus' name would be Tubbs.
Mine would obviously be a Microraptor. I would name it Macroraptor. I think that would make me laugh every time I said it. Thank you, Alex.
And I'm going to agree with Alex here. It would also be a Simasuchus for me, and I would name mine Ricolas.
I like that.
I think I would really love a Diplocaulus. I have no idea what I would name it. It would have to. It's one of those animals that like just has to be named when you see it. When you look it in the eye, you just know. And it would be something absurd. It would either be. It's like a cat. It would either be like a hyper like realistic person name, or it'd be like Butter. Like I can't.
I can't Butter.
I can't predict what it would be, but it's like I'm thinking about my current frogs are Pac-Man, Inky, and Blinky. Like it just happens, you know. And it's an amphibian, so it needs a name that captures their essence. I don't know what I mean by that. I know what I mean, but I can't describe it. Boomer, that's too. It's too on the nose. See,
Too on the nose?
It can't be too on the nose. It has to be kind of wild. It has to make.
Okay, what
no
about
sense.
Dundee? Like
Frisbee.
Crocodile Dundee. Ooh,
Frisbee, I like. Ooh.
Makes,
like
it's not a boomerang.
Baseball.
This is my Diplocalus disc golf.
Well, exactly. Yeah, something ridiculous like that. I think I'm going to go with Frisbee. That struck me.
I like that.
It would be
You should have caught the Frisbee. It struck you.
Okay. Our next question comes from Dinodom, who asks, what now dead paleontologist or biologist, Marianne Cope, etc., would you love to have like 24 hours to just talk to? And I had a lot of people come to mind. But what really came to mind to me is Richard Owen. I would like to meet Richard Owen, the man who named Dinosauria, a famously unpleasant man who is not particularly kindly remembered by history. I would really like to see how much of that personality is true and how much of it has come out of just other people's impressions they got of him, because he came from a relatively underprivileged background compared to other scientist nobles at the time, of the kind of the William Bucklands of the world, who are the educated priesthood. And Richard Owen was not from that background. And what I'd really like to hear about him and talk to him about are his views on evolution, because he's widely touted as an anti-evolutionist. And I don't know how true that is compared to, I think he may have just had differing views than Darwin. And I know he didn't like Darwin. And I really want to kind of get to the truth of what his views on the matter were. So that's my answer.
Good
Alex?
answer. Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to meet Cope, but I would want to meet, I think, John Ostrom, mostly because I almost met him. The overlap in our lives was near, and he died sadly in 2006. But I think it would be very cool, because he did get to see it towards the end of his life, but I mean, just to see the legacy of his ideas at this point in time, where it's just it's just taken for granted that birds are dinosaurs, for him to get to see some of the prehistoric planet, life on our planet, a fully feathered Deinonychus on a widely consumed program. Get a beer with good old Ostrom and just catch him up on all the cool stuff, all the impact he's had on everyone's life. I think would be a very, very good vibes experience.
Before I get into my answer, I think it's worth repeating. I don't know if I told you this, Alex, but I believe John Ostrom's son follows me on Twitter.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I just noticed getting followed by a Matt Ostrom, and I think he followed me after I made a post about John Ostrom, and I'm like, either he's searching for his last name, or I think this may actually be a son or grandson or something. Anyway, if you're watching this, thanks for following me. I follow you too. But I would really want to talk to one of the really, really old school paleontologists in the post Bone Wars era. I wouldn't want to talk to Osborne. I think that would be a miserable, miserable experience. It would be like listening to Alex Jones. But
he'd bring you.
What would he?
No, never mind. That's a joke for later.
Yeah, it would just. He'd be awful. But I really, really have always really admired people like Romer, Alfred Sherwood Romer, William King Gregory. A lot of the people who in this kind of post-Cope and Marsh era were trying to understand life in the past as animals and as links in the evolutionary tree beyond kind of clout chasing. Marsh's main goal for a lot of time seemed to be, and Cope's as well, especially during the Bone Wars, were just name as many things as I can. Mm-hmm. And then you have this generation of students underneath who are dissecting a lot of modern animals, doing really detailed comparative anatomy, and trying to say, okay, we have these fossils, beyond these broad scale similarities that people have noted before, what is this like? How do we understand it? Could this animal grip? Could this, could it climb trees? Could it feed this way? And kind of starting to ask the questions we ask now. I find that really interesting, and I would love to see what they think of what we now know about the fossil record. Right. These are the people who first saw an ornithomimosaur, and they were like, what the hell is that?
What the?
to now get to show them everything we know about these groups of dinosaurs and other animals, I think would be really special.
I went back and forth on a bunch of answers on this. Several of them were joke answers, like, I just want 24 hours with one of these guys. Just give me 24 hours. But I also did... one of the ones that went through my head was just Buckland. I just want to just let's have a special episode of the Skeleton Crew where we find the weirdest shit possible and have William Buckland eat it on camera.
William Buckland mukbang.
William Buckbang.
I hate the fact that you said that so much.
But my honest answer is Baron Franz Nopska. I think that of a lot of these historical paleontologists, even outside of like asking him about paleontology things or showing him the impact of a lot of the ideas that he helped pioneer in the field, he just sounds like one of the coolest people to just spend a day with. Just like all of the just random shit that he would do around his life. It's just like, I just want to hear your stories, man. He must have been fascinating. So yeah, that's mine.
Tight.
I'm gonna utilize the /biologist part of that question, and answer with Carl Akeley. For those of you unaware,
God, you're right.
I am right. I know I'm right. You're familiar with the photo of him standing next to the leopard that he fought off with his bare hands.
Killed with his bare hands.
Killed with his bare hands. Yes. I don't know. I feel.
That's a great photo.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
wow.
so funny. It's incredible. I love it. Carl Akeley, because like I don't know if he did much science really, but like his, style of museum diorama is like, I don't know, it's the pinnacle of diorama in my opinion. And it's what makes museums like the Milwaukee Public Museum, like the Field Museum, like the AMNH, like the Denver Museum, so good, are these like immersive, specifically lit and timed dioramas that really like feel real. Like, yeah, no. So I don't know. I feel like he's the kind of person, because he went on like these collecting expeditions, that would have tons of stories, but also I would be curious to just talk about why or how he arrived at, that style of diorama and all of that.
It's a good answer.
Yeah. To answer your question, Amelia, or the implicit question, he didn't do a lot of biology, but he was a very prolific inventor. Like he invented a lot of taxidermy methods that then later went into his dioramas as well. He invented an early form of film camera that was actually used for recording newsreels during World War I. So like,
what? I didn't know that bit.
No, it's like he's basically like a kind of old school inventor polymath. He never really did biological research, but he became really active in like gorilla conservation, because after collecting them for a while, he was like, I feel like I don't know if this is studyable. Like, I don't know if we should be doing this. So he started studying them in the wild and then was like, we shouldn't kill these animals.
I thought you were going to say guerrilla warfare, given what he's done.
He started to specialize in gorilla.
No, but anyway, I mean, he's a fascinating choice. I wouldn't have thought of him from the phrasing of the question, but he's a great choice. Really, really interesting guy.
No, I remember him from my intro biology course at Carthage. Like our professor and one of my other advisor is really into museum history. And so he spent some time telling us about Carl Akeley, because at the Milwaukee Public Museum, we have one of his first dioramas, which is 2 little woodchucks in a pond.
Oh, I think I'm looking at that right now online. That's a cute diorama. I like that.
It's really cute. Yeah, it's great. It's across from the bubbler by the bathrooms on the first floor.
I hate that you said bubble.
Anyway,
whatever you say.
Now moving on. Whatever.
Speaking of bubblers, the secondary question of Dinodoms is: what prehistoric ocean do you think would be the worst to swim in besides Hell's Aquarium, aka the WIS? And to that, I said anything before the Ediacaran would be so boring to swim in, because the only life would be invisible microbes and maybe some bacterial mats. No, thank you.
Yes. I would maintain that it would actually probably be pretty fun to swim in the Cretaceous. It'd be warm. You probably wouldn't get eaten if you weren't dumb. The worst seas to swim in are, like Dalton says, before the Cambrian. But I'm talking about either all of your flesh boiling off your bones because you're swimming in the Archean or the Hadean, or you're swimming through the slush of the Cryogenian when the oceans were not a place you could be physically. Those would be the worst.
I like how honestly we all took this question.
I mean, I think, echoing Alex's choice here, like the multiple times that Earth's surface has been almost completely glaciated, I think it would be the ocean, even if life had evolved, the ocean would be dead, basically. And you could not surface for air. It would just be featureless and probably almost black just under the surface because most of the light would be attenuated. Bad time to be in the water.
Yeah.
I'm also going in a similar direction of, but a whole lot later, of the incredibly hot, acidic hydrogen sulfide poisoned soup at the end of the Permian that's just full of dead, rotting fish and bacteria. It was so bad that it's hypothesized it would be killing things on shore from just being around it. I think that one would be pretty. I think that would suck to swim in, personally.
Yeah.
I think if we're only considering the WIS as Hell's Aquarium, the Maastrichtian of Europe is a bad place to be if you are small and defenseless. Like, the mosasaurs that are living there are built to kill. Like, they're horrible. Like, I'm just thinking of that one that's enshrined in the mausoleum in Maastricht. That's like the size of a T-Rex skull, the Progmathodon. It's bad. In spirit of the question, you guys are kind of being honest, but not very fun. The Maastrichtian Europe was a bad place in terms of, like, if you are not a mosasaur, you don't want to be there. It's like, good lord, like, that skull is nuts. Like, I hope you guys have an excuse to go to Maastricht at some point in time because it is insane.
I'm also kind of surprised that none of us said, like, I don't know, like a couple square miles, like in the Yucatan Peninsula about 66 million years ago probably would have been a pretty bad time to go swimming.
You know, I think it would have been okay because it really very quickly would have stopped being your problem.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you would think, hey, it's really warm and sunny here, and then your atoms would have just like split apart.
Like if you were on the same continent as when a T-Rex bit.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I step out of the time machine. I check my global positioning satellite. I calculate the range. I see I'm right at the range to catch the 1,000-foot tsunami. I get my surfboard. I will be remembered.
You ride the coolest wave anyone.
All the dinosaurs are like watching this wall of water that's about to sweep through North America.
There's
and
a
wash
dot
them all
on the
away.
horizon of it.
The coolest motherfucker to ever live.
Right, it's raining fire around him. The atmosphere is near ignition. Alex is just tanning. He's got one little dab of sunscreen on the bridge of his nose.
Just you focus the shot on the front of me, but if the camera pans around, it's just exposed muscle.
You look like Two-Face.
Okay, good question. Next one.
Skin spoiling.
The next question for us comes from Awainverse, who asks, what is a big data set or data analysis tool that you would really like to see and use without having to actually find new fossils for the record? This is inspired by Russell's fish length study. And for me, I think in an ideal world, what would be extremely helpful for researchers in paleontology would be, and to an extent, these things kind of exist already. There are depositories of 3D morphological data. Things like Morphosource and Digimorph, which I love and rely on to do work. But in an ideal world, what I would love to see is an open access 3D database of osteology for essentially every species of vertebrate. And full body scans of every vertebrate, raw scan data, individual STLs of the segmented bones. It would be a tremendous amount of work, obviously, to compile and maintain. It's unrealistic, but I mean, that's what I would want. It would make our job tremendously easier.
Agreed.
Yeah. Now, my answer is kind of, well, Alex, I think actually you're supposed to go next in the rotation, aren't you?
Oh, I would. Yeah, I mean, like Dalton's desire is, I think, what we should all be aspiring to. But I will be self-indulgent and say the data set I'm building, I would like to use at some point. I have all these palettes. I've got to do something with them.
Yeah.
Next.
So I think this is kind of a tool that could be used to achieve this vision. But what we really need for a lot of this is a dedicated facility for tomographic imaging of specimens of a wide variety of material properties and sizes and challenges. Because right now, micro CT technology is generally not great for anything that's bigger than like a large football or like a Thanksgiving turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And even a Thanksgiving turkey can be pretty tough, but you really need high resolution scanning to be able to see a lot of the features of interest. You know, if you're going beyond a very gross level of what's present. Ideally, a facility like that could use like X-ray tomography or neutron tomography or muon tomography or any of these modalities that can do different kinds of penetration and image things of different sizes. I don't think I can say very much right now, but I'm a dreamer and I try to make things happen. And so one day maybe you'll all come back to the Skeleton Crew video and think, man, he was really onto something there. But we'll see if I'm ever able to pull this kind of stuff off.
Kind of like what Alex said, like the data set that I'm building. Like I'm just everywhere that I go to do specimen visits, museum visits, I'm taking like every conceivable measurement that I can of every specimen and building up like this mosasaur measurement super data set that I hope can be used for just, you know, studies of size distribution and variation and ontogeny and like anything you can think of that you could ask with linear measurements. That I hope to eventually make public, but for now it is my burden to keep and to build. Yeah, because like in case you weren't aware, there are a lot of mosasaurs in collections around the world. In the United States and Canada alone, there's about 4,000 of them. So it's a huge untapped resource of information, in my opinion. At the very least, for studying lizard evolution and marine adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah. So our next question comes from Wheat. If you had the chance to bend the nomenclature rules to rename any creature in the fossil record, what would it be and why? And my answer is simple. It is Megalodon the bivalve. Rename it to something boring, please, because Megalodon is the shark, and I'm aware that it's the species and not the genus. And it annoys me when people are like, "Oh, are you talking about the bivalve? Do you mean the bivalve?" I know that it's all in good fun and people are kind of trying to be cheeky about it, but it just annoys me. And so if I could change it, I would change it.
Cool. Good answer. Oh, sorry. Something buzzed. I would, first I would encourage that the people exercise moderate disrespect towards nomenclatural rules. But more importantly, Homo sapiens. We're changing it. Yeah. We're changing it. I'm changing it to something dumb. Maybe whatever featherless biped is in Latin, or maybe just like...
I'd love that so much.
Yeah, maybe that. And I'll be like, there's a historical precedent, as man was originally defined as a feather, yeah, that's it. That's what I would do. For the lols.
Jimbo.
Oh, yes. Well, honestly, no fossil right now. I'm sure that at some point it'll occur that I can't give something a name I want to because some idiot named it first. Named it something stupid. But I really, really, really hate the scientific name of the emu because, like any good animal with a slightly unusual name, its genus and species name should just be its name. Like the gorilla, which is gorilla. One subspecies is gorilla, which is wonderful. I think that the emu should be emu, and not the very, very challenging and difficult to spell consistently, especially when you have to write a lot, Dromaeus novae hollandii.
Yes.
It's just a bad thing. It's not inclusive to people with dyslexia.
No, it's not.
Scott is not allowed to research rat tights.
I'm sorry to interject and ruin the flow, but James, you've inspired me. Can I suggest, in the spirit of this question, I would like to propose a new nomenclatural rule, which is that specific names cannot be longer than generic names. Because when you abbreviate a name, you abbreviate the species and not the genus. And so when you abbreviate Dromaeus novae hollandiae, you have to do D, and you still have to spell out the hardest part, which is novae hollandiae. Or if not a length-based metric, either change it so that you abbreviate whichever one is easier to abbreviate, or just that specific names have to be easier to spell than generic names.
I would be fine with that. I mean, it's just that I've had to write it so much. And every time I do, I'm like, Jesus, who did this? Why? And then you get gorilla.
Or bison.
Bison.
Axis. Yeah.
Mephitis.
Meles.
We could go on.
I have actually, now that I think about it, two that are equally short and equally stupid. I would rename Gigant Spinosaurus because I hate that you have to say it like that. There should be an O in there. Gigantospinosaurus. Have it have a flow to it. It has terrible mouthfeel the way it is. Trash name. Awful. I would also rename the group of phytosaurs. I think it's dumb that anybody thought that they were plant eating, but I would keep the same pronunciation. I would just have it spelled with an F. They're phytosaurs.
That's one of the stupider jokes you've made on camera recently, Scott. That's really good.
Oh, thank you.
That's so stupid.
All right, let's come on, Amelia.
I had another one and I'm not remembering it. Pick a platycarpus, any derivation of that name, derivative of that name. I don't like that so many of them are named blank platycarpus or blank platycarpus. Like, please, let's be creative. And I just remembered the other one. Like, we're sticking to mosasaurs here. Plesiotylosaurus is not fun to say, and it's not accurate. It's not a tylosaurus. It really doesn't look like one. I hate it. It's a mosasaurine. Give it a funky name, because it is. I don't actually hate it. It's very interesting, but it has this horrible name that I hate to think about.
All excellent answers once again. Moving on to our next question. This one's from JP Lover 16, who asks, "Are there any cryptids that you guys are interested or believe in?" And I will say that I used to believe in cryptids more when I was a young man. I have abandoned this generally. I don't know that I really believe in any cryptids at this point. But what I am intrigued in are the idea of like reoccurring ideas that pop up in disparate cultures. I think that's an interesting phenomenon. So like, as Alex is alluding to, the Hat Man, which I won't elaborate on. But in the cryptid realm, I mean, I think like Bigfoot is interesting, and like wild forest men, like wild hairy men who live in the forest, seems to be an archetype that appears in numerous cultures around the world.
The Sasquatch,
Yetis, Yowies,
SwampApe, patron.
And like some of that to a degree is like influenced by like and with all crypto stuff, like a lot of it cryptids, I should say. Well, I hate crypto more than I hate cryptids. I like cryptids. Yes. I think they're cool. But I think a lot of like our kind of modern conception of cryptids has unfortunately been kind of removed from the original cultural context in which these ideas came up into this like field of like, some of it is pseudoscience, some of it is hokery, and some of it is a legitimate pursuit of like the unknown by people who are taking it seriously. But all of that kind of removes it from the original like societal and cultural source of a lot of these myths. But the fact that so many cultures come up with these wild forest men myths and ideas, I think is interesting, and it's interesting to investigate why. Beyond the fact that there probably aren't, giant unidentified primates living in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. That's my answer.
That's a good answer from Dalton. Yeah, I would say that I think cryptids are mostly interesting in their like historical and like societal implications. I will say that in my youth, I was more interested in cryptids because, as a generalization, anyone who has ever been interested in a cryptid was I was once a youth who had recently left a major religion or was having, confusions about religion, and then I latched onto something else. If there's one I believe in, like gun to my head, it's like the 2 meter long deep sea fish that guy illustrated in the 30s when he went into the bathysphere. Because if there's a place where there's a fish that's a little bigger and a little weirder than we think, it's probably there. But now, let's talk extra dimensional entities, because those are real, and I'd speak with them.
That explains a lot. So
James.
I'll keep this very brief. I mean, I find all cryptids interesting. I do just miss being young, and I was very interested in them when I was younger. And I think because
were
they're
you
kind
raised
of
Catholic?
A little bit, vaguely, yeah. What I liked about them, and I think it's why, like in fiction, I really tend to enjoy the like late 1800s to early 1900s. I guess until the Great Depression, like kind of age of exploration kind of stuff. That's not the formal name of the term, but you know what I mean. That kind of archetype that's repeated in things like old adventure serials and everything. I think the thing that has always kind of attracted me to stories from that kind of stuff are just the fact that the world felt very big and that it felt like there were things left to discover. And I think that's what I liked about cryptids, was just thinking, you know, are there still things that we can learn about the world today, or with technology and cameras and video and everything, have we found everything we're going to find? So I like that aspect of them, although I recognize that there are probably none that are real. What I find very interesting in a non-traditional cryptid sense are that George Washington and Martha Washington wrote an extensive diary entry at one point about observing a herd of hippopotamus in the Potomac River by their home in the colonial era. And I'm interested in that because what the like, that's so specific, and like these
so
are not
weird.
It's like they are wealthy people. They're not like they're not doing Alex Jones talk radio or something like that. They were just
folks,
folks. Right,
there are hippopotamus in the Potomac River.
Yeah,
the Potomac River has been infiltrated.
Right. I've been tapped in, man. I've seen it.
All right, Hop.
Oh my god! After
The
recording,
Industrial Revolution's putting chemicals in the water that turn the hippos gay.
after recording, this reminds me of something.
Okay.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, what the hell? Like, were there hippos there? What the hell? How did they get there? What happened to them? I've always been interested in, like, what if we like dredged the Potomac near Mount Vernon? Like, would we find hippo remains and then figure out what the hell happened?
They're like Choppa. Who had one
El Chapo,
infamous?
El Chapo, yeah.
Yeah, he had.
Yeah, but I mean, this is
He had hippos.
Right. I mean, they could have been pets. They could have been escaped circus animals. But like, it's interesting. I just find it neat. That's it.
Yeah.
For me, I grew up loving cryptids, and not because I was like very deeply like dissecting like religious beliefs or anything. I just think that unknown animals are cool.
Sure.
That was it. I would say that my like the cryptids that I like believe exist are very boringly like the ones that are just real ass animals. Like, I would not be surprised if there's one or two like thylacines out there. I don't necessarily think there are, or like things that aren't like, they kind of stretch the definition of cryptids, like ivory-billed woodpeckers and stuff like that. But if we're going with something a little bit more supernatural, my favorite cryptid is hands down the Beast of Gévaudan. I would love to find out what that creature or series of creatures actually was. And I would also just absolutely kill for a proper movie adaptation of that story. Just like a really, really intense, gory horror movie about this like monstrous creature just killing people in 1700s France would be so cool. I know that.
Wasn't it a pack of wolves?
No, probably, but also maybe yes, because one of the reasons. Well, I'll keep this very short. But one of the reasons why a lot of historians are a little hesitant to say it's just a pack of wolves is because these were people living in an area at a time where they very, very, very routinely came into contact with wolves. So like, these are people who know what wolves are, know how to deal with wolves. And also like, some of the stories are a little weird. Like, there's several accounts of this thing, or again, things like preferentially moving through a herd of like livestock to preferentially hunt people and stuff. And also a lot of the descriptions of it being like red-brown with a tasseled tail and stripes and a dark line down its back and stuff like that, and being larger than average and able to carry off a person and stuff. I know that there was like an old French horror movie called old from 2001 called Brotherhood of the Wolf, but like I would kill for a really, honestly, Robert Eggers movie. Robert Eggers movie, hands down.
Cool. Yeah.
That would be the coolest thing ever made.
Wait,
It's so
is
rad.
Brotherhood of the Wolf the one that has like the Bloodborne outfit and the whip cane in it? Yeah, that's a
I think
movie.
so.
That's a very okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
But like it's a really neat story, and like every time that like the king sent out people to like kill this thing, and they would bring back like a slightly larger than average wolf, like all of the peasants who saw it were just like, that's not what we saw.
I see.
So and it happened for a long time. There was a huge body count. It's insane. But I would love to see an adaptation of that. A lot of the adaptations are or a lot of the hypotheses are basically like, yeah, it was probably like a striped hyena or maybe an escaped lion.
That's
yeah,
interesting. Okay,
it is.
Amelia, do you have a cryptid?
Yeah. Also liked them growing up, not because of any religious reason, but because I was weird. I'll just say that. I think you all are trying to veil this in other things. We're paleontologists. I don't think any of us were average children. Anyway, well, like also like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that some of us have a different number than some others, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like early 2000s Animal Planet and Discovery Channel was loaded with cryptid documentaries, and like it was
That's
fun
true.
to watch as someone who just liked, fantasy stuff. And like I went, back and forth between believing in some of them to varying degrees, but whatever. Nowadays top 3 just for fun. The Loch Ness Monster, because it's cool. Obviously it's not real, but plesiosaur, nice. Second, I like chupacabras because I love those documentaries. I play a game with myself called How Quickly Can I Figure Out What It Is versus how long it takes for them to say it's a dog with mange or like whatever, or a raccoon or whatever. And last but certainly not least, local Hodag. Hodag's fun. I remember when I stayed with you guys and there was that Scooby-Doo episode with the Hodag. As soon as I realized what it was, I was so excited. It's like, thank God.
Yeah, oh my God,
so
right,
weird.
I remember.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, there's a cryptid called the Glastonbury Gloacus, which it's a Connecticut cryptid, and I recommend people look it up. I don't remember how to spell it, but you'll be able to figure it out, and it's a really funny looking thing. Another set of tremendous answers. This next question comes to us from Frankentrotsky, who asks, what is the current state of the debate on if Microraptor could fly? And this one I think we're not going to all chime in on. Just Alex, you've written a response and are documented, so perhaps you'd like to take it.
Sorry, I was looking up the Glastonbury. I could not find it, but I will take this one. So current debate on if Microraptor could fly. This is I don't want to say there's a confident answer, but currently I think there's an emergent, maybe not an emergent consensus, but an emergent argument that they were in fact fairly volant. Capable of powered flight. A few papers, I think the first in 2016, and then a few more recently, have argued that Microraptor and some other early paravians were capable of flight, and have pointed to structures that appear to be adaptations for flight, things like, I think, fused sternums and a alula or an alula adjacent structure that have evolved convergently, apparently. Within Microraptorines, I'm also aware of things that are in the work that might argue against this, and argue for a more traditional gliding hypothesis. So I think that's the current situation to my knowledge. I would just for a second, in the context of, could Microraptor fly? Could Anchiornis fly? Could things like this fly? Do they have powered flight? This is often discussed kind of in the context of flight evolving multiple times within paravians. And I think, and I'm not the only person or the first person to think this, but I think When we're having this discussion, it's important to also consider that what if flight just evolved once and Microraptorines retained a primitive condition, and Eudromaeosaurs and large troodontids are all secondarily flightless, or at least secondarily glidingless, because there's a similar kind of historical question in this regard in ratite birds, in Paleognaths, where tinamous are kind of deeply nested, and there was a lot of debates like, did tinamous re-evolve flight from what are largely terrestrial or otherwise exclusively terrestrial birds? And no, the evidence at least seems to suggest that they are retaining a primitive condition that is just lost in everything else. That is my answer on that question. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add?
No, I think you just covered it admirably.
The only thing I'll add is actually in the hallway where I work, we have a poster on that specifically about flightlessness in ratites and how it was possibly lost like minimum 3 times.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. PolarBlizzard asks us, I'm going to get my first tattoo soon. Hopefully we are still in time to give some advice for this if you haven't gotten your tattoo yet. If you have, congratulations. And I want it to be an animal from the Permian. I can't decide which animal. So what Permian animal do you think would make the coolest looking tattoo or cutest? My answer is Elginia. Elginia is a pariasaur from Scotland, and it has these crazy cool horns. It just looks like a mythical monster. It's awesome. That's my answer.
Yeah, that's a cool one. My answer is I couldn't choose. So some kind of temnospondyle I think would be neat. Maybe Prionosuchus or Prionosaurus. Suchus. But I think, you can't go wrong with a classic. And I think Dimetrodon is a great tattoo animal. And what's even more fun is you could put a cool design on its sail. Like, maybe something it wouldn't really have, but like your name stylized or something like that.
Well, we don't know they didn't have that.
Yeah, maybe they did have your name stylized on the sail.
They may have. Million monkeys, million keyboards, right?
Million Dimetrodon hypothesis.
James.
Exactly. I think Dimetrodon's a great choice. I like Gorgonopsids a lot. I think they're cool looking animals, and I think they'd be a cool tattoo.
I am going to go with my boy, the crowned crocodile itself, Estimenosuchus. I think that is one of the raddest, most metal-looking, at least skulls. Sure, the rest of the body is kind of weird lizard hippo-y, but God, that is a really cool skull.
Yeah.
And that would make such a cool tattoo.
That was my second choice.
No, good choices all around.
I think if you want something really cool or metal, or if you want to do actual a skeletal leather or a skull, Dimetrodon or a Gorgonopsid like an Ostroncevia is so cool. I love it. But if you wanted something cute or watercolory, a goofy amphibian such as Diplocaulus, which I have now plugged twice. I love Diplocaulus very much. Yeah. Permian is fun.
A lot of candidates.
Indeed. And so those are all your options, and you got to get one of those. Sorry, them's the breaks.
Ooh, Campulocephalus too, a big Permian Riptorid. But sorry.
I was actually thinking trilobites or Eurypterids if you wanted an invert, or have really just pretty artistic shapes. But those are our questions for September. So thank you to our patrons who asked this questions in September. Woo, September! We're sorry we didn't get to you until November, but now it's time for October, the regularly scheduled Q&A for this month. The first question for October is from DaikaijuMania, who asks, just like Hidetaka Miyazaki's Elden Ring being the closest thing he has to his ideal game, what would the Skeleton Crew's ideal dinosaur game that they would personally play? I'm going to go first because of the order, but I'm stealing James' thunder because we talked about this question last night. I'm sorry, James, but you're correct.
It's okay.
And it's just my ideal dinosaur game would be the ultimate release state of Prehistoric Kingdom. The way that the game already is, the levels of design you can put into the enclosures, into making your own structures, making your own bug houses, and I made a Solnhofen dome with Archaeopteryx and little enclosures for fake lizards. The dinosaurs are beautifully designed. The terrain, like everything about the game functions extremely well. And now it's just waiting for the implementation of like progression and management, which I also really like in tycoon style games. That is my favorite genre of dinosaur game, is the tycoon style, and I think it will be best realized in Prehistoric Kingdom.
Neat. Yeah, so just, quick. I don't really play a lot of dinosaur games. The ones I do like are the park building simulators, and something with kind of the level of realism and detail control as Prehistoric Kingdom is probably the pinnacle of what I could desire in that regard. I don't like to hunt or hurt dinosaurs in games. It seems mean. Also, I guess my ideal dinosaur game would simply be Bloodborne, because it's the best game ever made and nothing could be better. Also, I'm pretty sure Bloodborne was Miyazaki's at least favorite game to work on, according to his interviews, but perhaps my information is old. Just saying.
So Dalton already said my answer, but the release date of Prehistoric Kingdom, it's the game I've always wanted to play. I've always wanted to make a zoo that looks like a real zoo, with fine design control, with beautifully realized dinosaurs that have a lot of like really, really good behavior, and they grow and they reproduce and they have color variation individual to individual. It's just astounding. The only thing I can hope and pray for is that over the lifetime of the game, they continue to add more and more new species, and so that the game becomes increasingly rich rather than being kind of stuck at a roster at some point. It's all I want. It's great. I remember nerding out about that game with Alex over a Discord call early in the pandemic when the first trailer for it released. And I remember several times throughout the remaining couple of years when I've been very, very miserable and sad because of how stressed I've been or how overwhelmed I've been, I've sometimes watched the trailer of it to remind myself that there was a time in my life that I really, that I was excited, and just kind of get back a little bit of that childhood desire to just learn more and know things and study paleontology for the sake of it. And that carried me through in some very tough times. So that game.
I'll agree. Like, God,
you sound so upset.
No, it's just that like it's the right answer.
Yeah, it is.
I'll add on that like my ideal version of Prehistoric Kingdom would have like kind of two additional things. One, it wouldn't just be however this game ends up being. I want it to be like they were pitching it at the beginning of like, I do not think it would. I would consider it a feature complete ultimate prehistoric critter game unless there are also marine creatures and flying creatures, which they haven't shown in the game just yet, but they were in concept art and stuff. And God, I want them. I would think that that's 100% mine. But I do think that there is an untapped potential for it, and I'm just going to throw incredible amounts of shade. An actually good dinosaur survival game. We had a chat a while ago, the other night, of that everybody here besides me hates survival games, and I think that one that was actually done.
I love Subnautica.
Okay, all right, fair. Then it might have just been Jabe. No, it might have just been Dalton.
I like Subnautica, but that's not it.
Yeah, I think an actually good like play as a dinosaur either play as a dinosaur survival game or survive in and dinosaur environment survival game as a human would be actually probably the second one would be a whole lot better. Because like I think Saurian's a cool idea that's going to be bad. It already kind of is, but yeah.
Amelia.
All right. I'll agree with like the park builder thing first. I don't know as much about Prehistoric Kingdom because I don't have a PC. But I really like Zoo Tycoon. So as long as it's kind of like that, but like better, I would like that. The other thing is like a slightly more Pokemon-esque Paleopines type thing. Like I like collecting things, but also like, and I know Paleopines is meant to be comfy and not stressful, but I really like competition. So like, some more kind of competitive version of Paleopines I think would be fun.
Ranked competitive paleopines.
Another set of great answers. This next question comes to us from DessTG, who asks, if you were to make a new paleo documentary in the same vein as Prehistoric Planet, what would be a must-have scene inclusion? A Stegosaurus mating display as an example. And thinking in the vein of Prehistoric Planet, which is thinking of like naturalistic vignettes, like little moments that capture like several creatures in an environment doing their thing. It was harder than I thought it would be to come up with this. But then I realized I can't think of a single paleo documentary that has featured the Solnhofen. And like Archaeopteryx is perhaps the most famous fossil in the world, and yet it has not been in a paleo documentary. So what I want is I would love to see a documentary, and I'm going to change my answer from what I wrote a little bit to be more self-serving, a documentary featuring all of the various lizards of the Solnhofen and their various trials and tribulations. Some of these lizards are getting hunted by Archaeopteryx, which are gliding and flying through the trees, and they're running up and chasing them up the trees, and they're running around, running away from these little flying dinosaurs. Some of them are getting picked off by the various pterosaurs. Some of them are falling into the lagoon and getting eaten by like invertebrates in there. And some of them are, one of them gets eaten by a Compsognathus, which then dies because the holotype of Compsognathus has the holotype of a lizard species inside of it. And so that's something real from the fossil record that we could see, and we could feature all of these things in this cool, what I would imagine is a very beautiful tropical lagoon. I think that'd be nice.
I think that's a great choice. Mine would also be set during the Jurassic, but in the very early late Jurassic. Snap cut. A sauropod foot wrenches itself out of the muck. Days go by overhead. Rain falls. It turns the footprint into a muddy trap. A family of adorable little Limosaurus go by, and we get to look at the weird adults being completely edentulous, and the toothy little babies run like chasing some bugs around, and they get stuck in the sauropod trackway quicksand pit, and then a Guanlong comes and eats them, and also gets stuck, and then a little Sphenosuchian runs out across, stands on top of their body, kind of pulls some chunks off the Guanlong, and then runs away. And now, dear viewer, you say, why this specifically? Because we know this basically happened. The deposit that Limosaurus is from and then Guanlong is from appears to be some kind of predator trap that possibly was made by sauropod trackways, and also every animal I mentioned is cool and something we haven't seen before in a documentary like that. That's my must-have.
So forgive me for being a little bit grim. And I don't mean this to be edgy, but just because I think this is something that I would like to see brought to life in the like most detailed special effects possible, because it is truly like an almost unimaginable thing. But I want the documentary name is the same as the name of the best paper that's ever existed, just based on the title, which is Survival in the First Hours of the Cenozoic. And I want the day of the impact. I want the immediate hours afterward. I want the tsunami. I want the global firestorms that are, igniting all over the world because of all of the impact ejecta returning to Earth. These are fires that are so intense, they're completely burning up the coals they produce, so we don't have record of them in the fossil record. We know this. This is not an absence of evidence thing. We know this because, based on the thermodynamic calculations, there have to have been global fires. The only way to explain the fact that we don't find charcoal is that the fires were so hot they incinerated the charcoal, which happens in global firestorms. Or not global firestorms. We haven't had one of those, thank God. But it happens in firestorms.
Not in a minute.
Yeah. I want to see, I want to see the end of the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs. I want to see the couple of things that are trying to survive. And I want to see the last gasp of the dynasty with the terrestrial mammals trying to, or starting to eke out a foothold. I don't know. I think it would be an interesting thing to see in a truly apocalyptic view of life on Earth. And it's just never really been brought to life in that way. Everything's very macro scale. I want micro scale.
Oh, that's fun. Nice and light.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change my answer a little bit because I to peek behind the curtain, there's a question a little bit later that I give a very similar question answer to. But I'll say, as trite as it is, I'll just put it this way. I want to see a Tyrannosaur hunt that actually scares me. That I remember having a conversation with James a while ago about, like, that I know we've brought up before and got some fan art of that is in the process of happening. Of like how absolutely ridiculously existentially horrifying it must be to watch a Tyrannosaurus actually hunt and kill something. And I know that so many documentaries are made for kids, for younger people and stuff. I want to have my body react to seeing a Tyrannosaur kill something like that scene in Annihilation when the bear thing talked. And my body was just telling me I need to leave the theater right now. This is the scariest thing I've ever seen.
So good. That movie's so good. Holy shit. All right, and Comrade Amelia.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. There's not enough mosasaurs in documentaries, period. I want them doing more cool things. Like Prehistoric Planet did a lot with them, which I really appreciate. Something that it didn't do, though, in my opinion, was not enough interaction between them, specifically between different kinds of mosasaurs. Like, and it seems like every time that they're in documentaries, it's like, oh, a mosasaurus is going to fight another mosasaurus. Tylosaurus is going to fight another Tylosaurus. We know that they were all living at the same time. They were definitely interacting with each other. We know that from bite marks and gut contents and all of that. And like, I don't know, it'd be interesting. And then also thinking about like the Yorgi stream the other day, like doing the stupid Varanus threat posture and like just hanging there kind of arched looking stupid, I think would be so funny. And there could be like, you know, David Attenborough, whoever's narrating, would say something kind of silly and they would just kind of hang there for another minute in silence and then it pans to something else. Like, I think it would be extremely funny and in stark contrast to like some kind of horrific violence from like Prognathodon, you know?
Okay, hi everybody. We're back, and you may have noticed we've all changed our clothing, and that's because sometimes in the middle of a video we just all want to change our clothes. It's certainly not that we got too tired to continue recording and had to finish the recording on a different day.
Definitely
also,
not that.
We're definitely not wearing the same clothes as we're wearing in the Pachyrhinosaurus video either. That's, if we are, that's purely coincidental.
You made that up.
Yeah, you made that up. Don't look any deeper into it. But we're going to continue reading your questions now.
Gaslight, Gatekeep, Q&A.
Right. Dalton, go ahead.
Our next question comes to us from Nickname, who asks, if you could make one major discovery in your field of research, what would you want it to be and why? And the question for Scott is, if you could restore any prehistoric species, what would it be and why?
I really like how I have a special sub-question on some of these.
Right. Yeah, we'll let Scott answer too as a treat.
For me, well, if I could make one major discovery, it would be discovering an early Jurassic Lagerstätten in the vein of the Solnhofen limestone. Something that's from a time before time, a time that we have minimal fossils from, and something that's going to capture small-bodied things. I selfishly would love to capture very early lizard evolution. That's the time that we'd want to see it.
Very cool. How early is too early?
How early is too early?
Yeah. What would be like where you wouldn't get it?
Probably like middle Triassic.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like the Triassic. So you think they really are diversifying in like the...
Yeah, I do.
In like the middle Jurassic? Okay.
At least the crown. The crown.
The Crown.
That's my suspicion.
The hit Netflix series is originating. Okay, fine. Wait, didn't I already answer this?
You did.
Are we repeating these answers?
No,
Wait, you haven't recorded your answer.
No, you did not answer this.
You typed your answer.
Okay, I'm losing my mind. Anyway, I would like, in my work, to discover a flaming cliff-style preservation site, but in the Middle Jurassic, where it appears that everything interesting in the radiation of major dinosaur groups for the end of the Jurassic and then the duration of the Cretaceous is happening. So slabs are cool, and we have slab specimens, and they're beautiful with soft tissue, but I want 3D. I want skulls. I want stuff you can CT scan, stuff like that. That's it.
Funny enough, my answer is basically Alex's, but I want early Jurassic, early to early middle. I just want something really, really good from that time. Again, Gobi-like preservation. It would be amazing.
Well, I think you want middle early Jurassic or late early Jurassic.
Yeah, probably. Right. I don't want, although it would be cool to see like a good snapshot right after the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. It would be interesting to like catch the faunal recovery kind of the way that the Danian localities in North America are capturing the post-KPG.
I mean, that's mostly what Jim's fieldwork was. We would be working in these Hatangian and Cinnamurian deposits with some incredible stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean... In the Skinamarink.
The adults are talking.
Yeah. Alex, Jesus Christ. All right, Scott, you go ahead. Answer your consolation question.
I'm sorry.
Well, I would probably say that like a dream project would be something. I don't want to say this in a way that, like, okay, let me actually just. Sorry, I almost said it just honestly because of Alex's teeing up. I almost said something very barbed and stuff in a way that would have made it seem like I hated what I was doing right now. I was going to say in a like I want to work on something that's fun and flashy and people will like looking at. And no, honestly, I would probably love to work on some sort of new species of large theropod that has extensive soft tissue preservation. Because one, it's something we kind of don't really have. Two, it's something that would be one absolute hell of a challenge that I think I would be up to the task for. And three, it'd be a new species. And that would also be really, really cool. So like, I've worked on some really, really interesting things in the past, but not something that kind of like checks off all of those boxes of being just so difficult, so important, and a new species. And like filling in something that's like not really known. But I mean, yeah, that I've dreamed about projects like that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Either a new specimen or something I imagine is already lurking in a microfossil collection somewhere. I want to find a real Hell Creek mosasaur, but it's probably going to be, if it was there, they're going to be like tiny little river dudes. Like, that would be really fun. And really important.
Cool.
Do we have any like solidly freshwater mosasaurs?
Yeah, Pananosaurus.
Okay.
I want to say it's Italian.
Pannonia is it's going to be it's Balkans, I think.
Okay.
If it's from Pannonia. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. It was worked on by an Italian team because like I don't know, there is an Italian one and I think it's that one, but it might be that the team was Italian and the fossil is not. Or
I would not be surprised if that was I wouldn't be surprised if that was an Italian team based on the area. Yeah. But Pannonia is it's like what's now kind of like Hungary-ish. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. So no, there's that one, and then like we know that the seaway ones at least were exposed to freshwater semi-regularly, although whether that means that they were entering the rivers or if it was just like from rainwater, I'm not sure if we know that for certain.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Very cool. Dalton, before you go on, I would like to remind us that we don't have time for follow-up questions. Just because we had two in this question and answer session with Alex asking about Dalton's and Scott asking about Amelia's, and we simply do not have time.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's interesting. It's a shame, but it's the sacrifice we must make.
Yep.
Yes. Our next question comes to us from the man with no name, who asks, if you had to be some kind of scientist other than a paleontologist, what field would you like to work in? For me, it's either marine biology or, and this answer reflects kind of where I was at in high school a little bit, where I was very interested in marine biology, and I still am, or perhaps epidemiology and public health. Although, given the world's absolute just fumbling of the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't think I'd actually want to work in public health because it would make me depressed.
Nice. I'll echo Dalton a tiny bit, but if it were science that I would be going into, that's not paleontology, deep sea marine biology. I want to see some weird dudes, some freaky guys, and then that would be. I've always had kind of a secondary passion for that.
So my honest answer, I probably wouldn't be a scientist. My interest in science growing up and continuing into like early grad school was driven a lot by my passion for paleontology, and was driven by the fact that I was pursuing that as a career. Like, that's what motivated me to learn about everything and to become a scientist. As I am now, there are many groups other than like extinct animals that I would like to work on, but I don't think I would have gotten here had I not had that as a through line. And so I probably would have either gone into like data science or maybe gone to law school. The kinds of aspects of science I like are like solving problems and like leveraging information to answer questions. And so I think I would have been attracted to those kinds of fields if I weren't in research.
Cool.
I'm going to slightly amend my answer on here and give like a short, if I was still in science, and then my answer here being if I chose to not be in science. If I was still in science, probably something like herpetology or ornithology. I've always loved reptiles and birds. I think that they're absolutely incredible. And I wanted to be a herpetologist for a little bit. But if it was something outside of science, something like historiography, or I guess an equivalent of that, but for science. So it's kind of science tangential. That like I've always really liked the study of science, like looking back at these biographies of people and how people were looking at things and solving problems and like what were the zeitgeists at the time and stuff. I always find those absolutely fascinating. And so maybe something like that.
I think similar to James, if I hadn't kind of wound up at the school I was at with the people that I was around, I don't think I would have wound up in paleo at all, and I would have wound up like as an airline pilot or something. But other sciences I think I could see myself doing was my first research experience was actually in an Evo Devo lab, so I think that would have been the route that I would have went, like extant reptile Evo Devo stuff.
Cool.
Tight.
All right. Frankentrotsky asks us, how can amateur paleo people work with people in the former colonized world and Latin America to put pressure on scientific institutions to do things like repatriating fossils that were either smuggled or stolen legally through colonial policy? This is a very tricky question for which we can give our best perspective, but obviously it's not something that any individual or even small group of individuals like us can really solve alone.
Right.
My gut instinct and my thought on this matter is that the best thing that amateur paleo people and like individuals can do is to support local institutions, either monetarily if possible, or just by visiting and making sure that you know people see this as a useful thing, volunteering if possible, but supporting local institutions however you can is best, because those institutions are going to be the best able to gauge what the local needs are. And then pursue the means to meet those needs. Like those things kind of have to be done institutionally. So supporting your local institutions in whatever capacity you can. That's my advice.
Yeah, and I just want to I want to just follow in here with my perspective. I think Dalton's like right on the money. In my experience working with international collaborators and everything, I think one of the things that comes up the most is just like resources are not often there for the kinds of fights that these are. And like when you're talking about fossil repatriation, it can become a very large scale international like diplomatic thing. Like this is not a small concern. These are things that are at the forefront of a lot of geopolitics now. So the most important thing is supporting those institutions so that they have the resources to take the action they need to take. And also to continue exploration of the, you know, of their own paleontological heritage. You know, even if historically they weren't able to, because of colonial policy or geopolitical dynamics. If they're supported now, they often can, and in many cases, they are able to find amazing fossil material that they are able to that they are able to keep in their collections or put on display and have studied by teams of researchers from their local community.
Our next question comes to us from King Zazu, who asks, what do you think would be the absolute worst dinosaur to be around for an extended period of time? Also, can I have a cookie? Well, of course you can. My answer would be any Saint Ignathed. They seem like they'd be stinky, mean monsters.
Well, you cannot have a cookie. But the correct answer is a large theropod. Any of the ones that would eat you would be the worst one to be around. I'm glad I could help.
I think as pretty as ceratopsians were, they were almost assuredly large, dumb, panicky animals. And I think that they would have been incredibly dangerous to be near. Like, I just imagine, the way rhinoceros are, the way large ungulates are, herbivores kind of expect that you're going to try to kill them. And they respond accordingly. And ceratopsians are enormous with armaments on their head. And I don't think it would have been fun.
I was going to say something like Therizinosaurus or something like that. But then I read James's answer and I was like, oh, he's correct. Never mind. I agree. It's a ceratopsian.
I'm going to assume that this means like in a zoo scenario, because that makes more sense to me why you'd be spending an extended period with an animal.
I assumed it was like one of those like Facebook quizzes of like which animal would you rather be locked in a room with for like $1 million thing, and people are like, oh no, I wouldn't choose a gator, and it was like, what are you talking about? It's just gonna sit there.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. The vibe I got from this was like the worst pen at the zoo. I think it's gonna be Spinosaurs.
That could be bad.
Stinky.
They're big and they're eating fish, and like the penguin house at the Bronx Zoo. I love the penguin house, or like the seabird house, but dear God, I don't want to spend more than 20 seconds in there.
Yeah, it's pretty
God, the number of water changes you need to do in that.
Stinky.
It's stinking inside. Our next question comes to us from wigi-gum, who asks, what are some ways that someone could be involved in the field of paleontology without a degree, if any, or without degrees, if any degree at all? I've heard of people volunteering at museums. Is that exclusive to those who are undergraduates? And I'm going to defer to someone else to answer this question. I think we don't need to all have a take because we probably all share a common sentiment.
Yeah, I think maybe we can. Maybe I wrote something for this one, and also Scott will have a different kind of approach and attitude towards it. But very simply, in my experience, at least in the Northeast, and I think this is likely true throughout the country and perhaps the world, parts of the world, that you can volunteer. Anyone can volunteer at a museum. I did it before I was an undergrad with the AMNH. And they take volunteers that are high schoolers. They take people who are retired. So, all ages and walks of life. There are other ways to volunteer. And I think Scott's probably much more qualified to talk about those than I am. It is possible to get into research, but frankly speaking, to get into paleontological research, you will need some degree, if not only for just like the experience it gives you, but to get your foot in the door.
Display purposes.
My degree is a display structure. Oh, it's over there somewhere.
Yes, a display structure. But anyone can get involved. If you're interested in doing research to publish, much harder to do without a degree.
Absolutely.
That's my answer.
I'll piggyback off of Alex's and basically say, yeah, anyone can get involved in paleontology, volunteer positions, or even some paid positions. Like docenting is very frequently a paid position at museums, depending on the museum. So like giving tours and stuff around the museum and stuff like that. Working like volunteering in fossil prep labs, as I say all the time. I've even heard of some opportunities of volunteers and stuff being able to go out and do field work, although that is few and far between. Basically, if you hang around a museum for long enough, people will give you jobs to do there. It's kind of like the stereotypical rags to riches, or I guess rags to paleontology.
Rags to rags.
rags to flannel rags. Like story of just like, oh, I started like in the mailroom or as a janitor or something, and eventually, or like I started as a dishwasher at this place, and then eventually I'm running it. That happens. Like you can just like start working at like just hang around and be volunteering for a while. I mean, hell, I started volunteering when I was 14. So like, yeah, it's possible. It's not even just possible. It's the way a lot of people get into it. And if you're determined enough, and if you know enough, people will see that, and people will put you to good use. I almost said take advantage of that, and that's a bad way of phrasing that.
It is. I have one thing I would just like to briefly add, but I think other than that, I think we've probably answered the question. But the only thing I would argue, like I would just emphasize, is Alex is right that if you are trying to go the research route, you should probably try to go for a degree. Just because like research positions that are paid usually do have a PhD as a minimum qualification. Like not that there aren't many other routes, and like being a curator or a professor is not the only terminal goal for paleontology, obviously. If that's what you want, like with the way that most institutions are right now, it's just kind of a simple fact that there are not a lot of people getting professor type jobs because of their aptitude without that kind of degree. I think the most recent one I know of was Jack Horner becoming curator of the Museum of the Rockies in the 80s. And like he started the museum, and also Jack Horner is like one of the most successful field paleontologists who's ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also, I mean, like
it was a while ago
when he broke into it. It was a different time,
right? And I mean, Jack also like was in school for a degree. Like I believe he's quite transparent about it. It was severe dyslexia that prevented him from graduating, but like, it wasn't that he didn't want to get a degree. He just could not complete foreign language requirements that were necessary at the time.
Oof, I feel that.
Right. Yeah, I think it was German in particular, which must be like quite difficult for an English speaker if you're dyslexic.
French wasn't a cakewalk.
Yeah, but right. A lot of letters and a lot of like diareses and everything. Like anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway,
to add to that
sorry.
a little bit. Like I know, like especially like among Mosasaur research, there are a couple people who contribute really good work that do not have PhDs, but just like know that it still takes a lot of work. Like it's still a lot to like get people to take you seriously, to put it bluntly, if you don't have that kind of background. But again, not that it's impossible, it's just going to be a lot harder. And I wanted to add one other thing about experience, which is field experiences. Like there's a whole range of them. There are ones that you can pay, like digs. You can pay to go on digs, and there's also not as many, but there are a few volunteer ones as well. So those you just kind of have to email places that have field programs and asking if you can tag along. Yeah, basically.
And often with volunteer field opportunities, you're probably going to have to cover not only the cost of any like time away from work or rent or whatever that you're missing. You'll probably have to cover the cost of your own travel. At least part of it, and the cost of your own equipment, and maybe other incidentals and possibly food. But just it's something to be aware of.
Yep.
I think we've tied a nice bow on that one, and so we'll move on to our next question from JP Lover 16.
Ooh, I have a very quick thing to add just before we move on. Alex, fix your camera.
What do you mean?
No, you are this at the bottom of your screen.
You've decayed downward.
Because no. It was just that like you moved it for t-shirt reveal.
Oh my god.
That's it. That's all.
My goodness.
All right.
Okay.
What a silly boy.
Please continue.
Don't ask about the t-shirt.
JP Lover 16 asks, what genus specimen that has good material but not a lot of work that's been done would you guys like to study most? And I'm going to cheat and not do a particular genus, but I'm going to say Sensulato, so in the broad sense. The lizards of the Solnhofen limestone. They're pretty good material. A lot of like kind of scattershot work has been done on them, but I would love to do a comprehensive work that really goes into details of their anatomy. They're the best look that we have at early lizard evolution, except for some new stuff. But a lot of this new stuff requires like synchrotron scanning, and these you can just go look at with your eyes. So,
right. I personally like one of the things that was kind of difficult during my PhD research is in particular for reasons I'm not really clear on. Troodontids have generally avoided really, really like detailed osteological description, especially a lot of the more basal troodontids. I, for a while before COVID made travel to Asia impossible, one of the proposed ideas for my PhD was to basically just like take a really, really good detailed look at a lot of the Chinese troodontid material and try to get some long form descriptions out. I would still love to. Sinus is one of the ones that I would love to work on because it seems to be a complete specimen. And there's like one published illustration of it. It's always been a dream of mine. Maybe one day I'll get to study it, but just any of those animals would be great.
I would be interested in working on some of those kind of beautiful Paravian dinosaurs from the Yishan. And there are so many specimens and so many interesting species, and I think there's really a lot to be done for a few members of that biota. That would be quite rewarding work. That's my answer.
Very good.
I'm still out of focus, man. What the fuck? I hate this stupid kid.
Mosasaur, like in general. If I had to pick, I mean, it's basically what I am
today,
doing,
aren't we?
Right. Wow, spicy. Well, it's like it is what I've chosen to do, literally. If I had to pick a specific genus that, like, I don't think it's any secret that I really like, Palosaurus. If I had to pick a specific specimen, I think it's a little crappy, but I think Bunker is worth writing up. It's really interesting. It's huge. It's nearly complete. It's an awesome animal.
I think you could do some fun work with Bunker.
Oh, I know I could.
All right. Well, Rad Reptile 615 asks, if we did clone dinosaurs and were caring for them in an actual zoological institution, not a theme park, what would we actually feed them? Could herbivores be sustained on the common grass and hay-based feed we use today? Could carnivores be raised on alligator or ostrich meat, since mammal meat is generally higher in fat? Captive diets are often very challenging for exotic species outside of their native environment. It's an excellent question, and it's tricky because we can't know for sure the physiology of extinct dinosaurs. I think thinking about herbivores, I think their fodder would have to be more selective and probably gymnosperm-based, maybe fern-based, barring like some late Cretaceous dinosaurs that would have had a larger angiosperm component of their diet. And I have no good gauge on how different a diet of mammal meat would be for these animals compared to the probably more predominantly reptile meat that they're basing. I think if it was a concern, you could probably just feed them a bunch of chickens, and that'd be a good and economical substitute. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
A strong answer, Dalton. I would say that it sure is fortunate we can clone them, because any zoo of this kind will be built on a bedrock of baby dinosaur bones. You will lose generations of them before you figure it out.
Yeah.
God,
See, that's what we feed them.
Such a warm answer.
That's what we feed them.
We
feed them the ones that we feed them their predecessors.
The soil of their enclosures will be verdant and rich.
So much phosphorus.
Hey, what if we made Jurassic Park, but every single one of the dinosaurs was a cannibal? Exclusively.
Does anyone else have any other thoughts or insights who might know more about animal physiology than I do?
Nah.
So I did a course in college when I was an undergrad that I was able to sit in on. It was actually a graduate student seminar, but they let me join because I was really interested. That was kind of modeling physiology of extinct species. And when we modeled digestion, I did Deinonychus. I based it specifically actually on the Harvard specimen because it had to be the body mass of an individual that I based it on. The nutritional qualities of different animals are not incredibly different. The main difference is like water content. I kind of like looked at this, I looked at a huge range of different mammalian and reptile and bird meats just to see what the nutritional qualities were. I like mammals are a little bit fattier, yeah, but like some birds are really fatty, like ducks, geese, right? They're incredibly fatty animals. I don't think there would be a tremendous difference. I think it's also worth noting that many theropods probably did eat mammals. Right, like Tyrannosaurus probably not, but like small Dromaeosaurus, Troodontids, I bet they ate a lot of mammals.
I think just to add a little bit, I think it'd be more about balancing like the nutritional value and not so much worrying about can they eat it. Like they probably can. And like with the herbivores too, like plants are made of basically the same things. The problem is going to be like fiber content or like toxins. And like that would be where the real trial and error is. Like I don't think any theropod is going to be allergic to a mouse, or something like that. It's just a matter of like getting the ratio of fat to water to protein to all that other garbage right.
Salt, fat, acid, heat.
Yeah, and like with herbivores, like I don't think there would be a problem with feeding them angiosperms because like structurally there's not really a major difference. Like the difference would just be if they're more used to like tougher, gymnosperm material, like okay, we'd have to roll with that, but I don't think it'd be that hard, really.
Corpses. They brought Komodo dragons to the Bronx Zoo and they died like in months. Like, sure, you can account for some stuff, but like I think a lot of the modern understanding of this stuff is like generations of trial and error and incredibly exhaustive research.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the question would really be, are they going to wind up behaving like exotic animals? Like, I think Komodo dragons are something we don't have a good handle on the husbandry of. And like, I'm sure there would be a range where some dinosaur species would be like inexplicably hard to breed in captivity or make thrive, and others would do fine.
I don't know. I think every species you resurrect from extinction, I think would qualify as an exotic species.
Well, right,
yeah,
but some of them do fine.
In terms of like taking care of them, like among like almost all I think all herps almost qualify as exotic pets technically.
Yeah, they all do.
But like there's a range in like a leopard gecko versus a Nile monitor versus a tegu versus a chameleon. Like
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying you would just have to figure it out.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is I think there would be an unpredictable level of what is going to be a hard one to figure out and what's not.
Yeah.
Like, for sake of argument, maybe like Microraptor would be fine, and you basically just feed it like the diet you'd feed like a bird or a reptile that eats meat. Like you feed it like what you'd feed to a bald eagle or something in captivity, or maybe a more terrestrial hawk. And then
it'd be very funny.
And then you have like, I don't know, Sinonithosaurus, and it refuses to eat anything other than like one species of bird that you've also cloned. And you like, I don't know, when I was trying to get a snake, right? Like I was thinking about corn snakes and ball pythons. And I didn't go with the ball python partially because they're illegal in Manhattan, which is where I lived when I was buying one. But like also because ball pythons are really picky eaters, and it's really, really easy for them to decide they don't want to eat frozen mice or frozen rats, which means you have to live feed them, which I didn't want to do.
I have a friend who has to live feed her ball python.
Right. And like corn snakes, on the other hand, I've given them the mice sometimes like partially frozen, and they eat it immediately because like I have to go to bed and it's not thawed yet. And I'm just like, whatever. I put it in and they're just like, all right, thank you. They don't like, that's what I'm saying. I think there's that level of unpredictability that we'd never have.
Hognose snakes are another great example because they're frog specialists.
Right.
So they like French cooking. It would be very funny to find out that like Tyrannosaurus Rex or something like Spinosaurus is actually incredibly easy to keep, and you have to separate them because they're just constantly like they're just reproducing. Like it's like I can't stop them from making more T-Rexes. They do so well, and then something like I don't know,
an absolute embarrassment of
like
T-Rexes.
Protoceratops is like a giant panda.
Yeah, it's just like we can't keep these things alive for more than a month, or like Argentinosaurus, or like so you just kind of like you just kind of like let it there, and then in a year you have 100 more.
Right. Now, here's the thing that I do think is just worth bringing up because of this, and we kind of have this coming up with another question. The hard thing is not going to be the diet for these animals. Atmospheric gas compositions were different when they were alive, and I think that of the two things, that would be far harder. Like, they lived in a generally lower oxygen environment, Most animals do fine with more oxygen. They don't like having less, but that's going to affect them. And I think more than anything in particular, they eat.
Yeah. I think ultimately it's going to be, you're going to have to get your company's lawyer to make a bunch of calls to a paleontologist in the middle of the night. And don't have any of your other staff do it. It's got to be your corporate representatives.
Frantic. They must be frantic calls.
Right. Anyway, I think we should move on to the next question, which is also about keeping them in captivity.
It is. This one comes to us from Awainverse, who asks, what aquatic paleo critter would you want to keep in an aquarium? And I was thinking in particular of like a home aquarium, so something,
Same.
And I'm not rich, so I can't afford a gigantic tank. So I'm thinking something that is reasonable tank size. And so if I could have a big tank, I would say an Anomalocaris. I think that they'd be really cool to see swimming around. And I don't think they'd be too out of scope for like a hobbyist aquarium. If you got to go smaller than that, still maybe like Opabinia or some other kind of free swimming Cambrian lobopod. I know Opabinia is very small, but they'd be good for like a 10-gallon tank, like in a dorm room.
Oh, that would be so cute. Oh my god, I didn't realize they were so small.
They're really small.
I think Anomalocaris would be too big.
I think some of like the big like tanks, like people who have like small shark tanks in their house.
Oh, okay, sure. I would keep. I have two answers to this. If it's a freshwater tank, I would keep a Diplocaulus or something.
Speaking of a critter that's way bigger than you think it is, they got like 4 plus feet long.
But they're a small species. There are several species. And I would take a little guy, and he'd have a cool little, like, mossy terrarium. But if I'm keeping a saltwater tank, I would want to keep something like Sacambaspis, which is silly looking. And also, in my head, I've constructed in my head that it's probably one of the hardest animals to kill by keeping it poorly. It seems like it would be like a horseshoe crab, and I used to raise horseshoe crabs, and they are incredibly tenacious.
No follow-up questions.
At the bottom, it's probably a scavenger. Anyway, that's me. James?
Oh, yes. I'm going to slightly preempt what I assume Amelia's answer will be here and say I would love a paludarium for a really basal mosasaurid. Like, I'm talking probably earlier diverging than we even know about right now, but something that is like starting to be a semi-aquatic to primarily aquatic small lizard.
Aegialosaur is not that big. You could probably get away with they're right, smaller than you think.
But our Aegialosaurs, I thought they were like supposed to be more marine already. Like, are they not?
I
might be mistaken.
I don't know. I don't know if we really know.
Okay, because I'm thinking essentially like caiman lizard lifestyle and enclosure, but it's an outgroup to mosasaurs. So that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Amelia's answer. Oh no, it's Scott. I'm sorry. I thought you had already gone.
I think Dalton and I might have some of the more realistic answers here. Because I chose like basically just sheerly out of practicality. I was doing a little bit of digging because this question was shockingly hard for me, and I settled on maybe something like Macropoma, which is a small little like coelacanth. The things get like maybe a foot or less long, and they kind of just look like regular coelacanths. And I already think coelacanths are pretty neat. So maybe something like that. I think that would be pretty cool. And wouldn't take an entire room in my house and all of my budget.
I will say, first of all, I've said this once, I've said it twice, I've said it many times. I love Diplocaulus, and that's another like a more realistic thing that I could see myself having. It's like I really love aquariums and keeping aquariums, and the only reason I don't have one right now is because I'm in New York, and it's really hard to have an aquarium in New York when you don't know if you're going to move every year. Diplocaulus, or like obviously if I have the budget and the space and the time, basal mosasaur would be really fun. Or now that like the goofy little Cambrian guys have been brought up and they're smaller than I expected, that would be so much fun. It would be like a shrimp tank, like a little one of those little nano tanks of just like weirdos. Oh my god, it's like a fever dream tank. Oh, that would be so funny. So yeah, no, that'd be great.
Just a bunch of hallucigenia.
The whole tank is a hallucination.
Is the formal name for a group of hallucigenia a hallucination?
I think so.
Certainly must
It's a
be.
mirage.
But that's a mirage of good answers we've just given to that question. And now it's time to move on to the next one, which is from Paleo AK92. And they ask, okay, this one's a very high concept and focuses on something I don't even know how you'd be able to verify. But how would you be able to check if life evolved more than once? In other words, did our Chad Alpha Luca just wreck some poor trash neighbor beta independently formed life? And this is an extremely difficult question and one that puzzles, I think, everyone who's interested in the origin of life. So, right, our earliest evidence of life comes from the chemical fossil record. It's not body fossils of microbes. It's not even fossils of like microbial mats. It is chemical fossils of compounds in the rock record that we know are produced by living cells. You would have to find really good evidence of something in the fossil record that predates every other known fossil that is structurally clearly a life form and not some kind of mineral or something in the rock, but that is chemically distinct from all modern life and also not altered by diagenesis, so the formation of the rock, and also any other like metamorphosis that would happen to the rock. So in short, it'd be an extraordinarily difficult thing to prove or to even find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't. It would require something very different, and I think it's very likely that there were probably multiple origins of life on Earth around the same time, if the conditions were conducive to it.
I have a question, and we don't have to talk about it in detail because it's going to get into hyperspace. Viruses? ?
Good question mark.
Possibly, maybe. Are they?
Viruses,
I don't know. They are
huge
different.
Question mark. So I guess we'll leave that open as something. If you're interested in possibly a separate kind of life, like go down the virus wormhole and learn about them because they're insane. And every single new fact I learn about viruses is worse than the last one. So have fun.
Yeah.
The gist is it's an argument whether they count as alive or not.
Mhm.
And I don't think we really understand where they came from. Unless I'm mistaken.
the fact that they use RNA implies to me that it's probably a single origin of nucleic acids, but
But is that single origin of life?
well, I mean, presumably, like I think it depends on how you splice it. Like, nucleic acids are organic compounds, and so like I would say that by definition it was something alive that originated them, like incredibly basally. But I think if you define life differently, I mean, viruses aren't even defined as alive formally. I think the fact that we talk about viral evolution means that they should probably be considered alive, but that's a debate we should get into later.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to get like into details. I was just wondering if there was a piece of information that one of you knew that I didn't. Because yeah, like as I kind of said, like it is mostly agreed that viruses are not alive, but some people I don't think that. It depends. It depends on your definition of life. They are using a lot of the same materials, but does that make them alive? They are replicating, but they need help to do it. Does that make them alive? Whatever. So, yeah. It's wild. I don't want to. Let's not spend more time on it. But like, it's really fun to think about. Scary, but fun.
It is. We've got two more questions. Our first one comes from Dinodom. The question I'm asking is simple in nature, but I think the answer will be complex. What is your ideal prehistory documentary? Like, what creatures and time periods should it focus on? And I'm going to cheat and say a little bit that my ideal documentary has kind of been made now, which it would be a format very similar to Life on Our Planet. Maybe without the modern day footage. I think they use that very well in that show. I don't think it's a knock against it. I think to my taste as a viewer, I would like less of it and maybe even none of it, but that's because the story it's trying to convey is one that I already know. And so I'd love to see more stuff in the past. But I think that the best and most effective paleo documentaries have been walk through time oriented. If like the trilogy of life, Walking with Beasts, Around Monsters, Dinosaurs, Beasts, those are all presented chronologically. I think the story of life is most interesting when it's treated semi-holistically. So you're looking at environments with creatures in them as opposed to focusing just on specific creatures for the whole thing. But my bias would be to focus the story on tetrapods because I think they're the most interesting life forms. That's my answer.
Cool. Yeah, there are like two in my mind. My ideal one for a general audience would, again, almost certainly be something like Life on Our Planet, which is broad in scope, focuses on Earth systems, plants, insects. You know, I really like the model. I was actually just watching it with my mom a little while ago, and it's great. The modern day stuff ties very well into the extinct stuff. But I think, yeah, something that's kind of aimed at maybe like 10 to 16-year-olds. It's thematic. It's beautiful. The music and the art direction is, you know, recognizable. Something that would make a non-specialist into a specialist, like something that'd be like, I didn't even think of the past like this before. For me, like, what would a documentary that would excite me personally? And I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I don't really watch a lot of paleontology documentaries. It's something, you know, I like to see some of the designs, but like, it's not something I don't know about. So, you know, I'm always more interested in like seeing documentaries on stuff I don't know. But if they were to make a documentary like that was maybe an 8-episode thing that is just about the evolution of crocodilians, or a dedicated like prehistoric planet level documentary on like a Paleozoic sea of the Carboniferous, the Permian, or the Triassic, just like about these weird Paleozoic periods where I don't know as much about what was around then, or just weird Triassic stuff. Strangeness is my interest. Sorry, that's it.
Yeah. So I will say, I think that I love what has been done with both Life on Our Planet and Prehistoric Planet. I think, like, we've talked about this in a bunch of videos and in some of our streams. They are fundamentally different in approach. I think both of them are great.
Yeah.
I think given that I'm kind of in the phase of my life where I'm thinking about what would I use as an educator, I think Life on Our Planet is something that like I could use in a course. I think Prehistoric Planet really scratches the itch that I have of like, I want to see these animals alive. Like, it is, I think if you had one wish and it couldn't be anything like financial or quality of life based, right? It would just to see one of the animals that I work on alive would be obvious, right? I would probably weep, right? But I want to break from everybody else who's talking. They should have sent a poet. I want to break from everybody else, though, because I think that what I would really want to see right now, especially given the state of like trust in science in the United States, which there was a poll I think I saw yesterday that it is at a historic low among both Republicans and Democrats. It is much lower among Republicans, which is maybe unsurprising that I think only 13% of registered Republicans are quoted as trusting science, which is
Good God.
Awful.
Bad.
But it's also declined among Democrats to historic low levels. And so this is a society-wide thing. And what I think is important is a documentary that really shows how scientists work. I want something that isn't overly dramatized, and I want something that isn't contrived and really engages with what is the process of testing a hypothesis, what does it involve to gather data, how do we do our work, how do we learn the things that we learn, right? Because I think that often how we find these things out is maybe the more incredible story than what we learn. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see a documentary that really shows that, right? Follow a scientist around for a year while they work on a big paper, and you'll see some really amazing stuff.
I'm going to slightly tweak what James said and basically be like, I would love a documentary that's kind of in like 2 parts, or maybe each episode's cut in half, maybe switch back and forth. I don't know. Figure it out. That's what directors are for. But I want something that is simultaneously, it is showing what James was saying of just like, how do we know these things? And also telling the specific stories of individual fossils. Because like, Alex's answer earlier, like much earlier, about like the Jungurasuchus in the like sauropod footprint and stuff is such a fun little like we know this happened, and like just this those are the things that have always grabbed me in paleontology, is these specific little stories that are written in the stone that we can learn to read, and like going back in time and showing this is as far as we know, not like some other documentary, like every other documentary and stuff that are basically going like, hi, we know that some of these animals did some of these things and some of this is based off of like behavior that we see in real animals. It's like, as far as we could tell, this is how this went down at this time, and then showing like not just a talking heads thing or anything like that, but like this is the process that we went through. Ideally, it would be like a thing that's evolving at that moment where they could kind of, like James said, follow scientists around and see how they're working through something. It doesn't have to be that. And like show some of the stories like that, like almost like Big Al. Like it's like I always really loved that special, because it was just like, these are real things that we know, that we are pretty sure that this poor animal went through during its shockingly short and really hard life.
Right.
Like humanizing both the animals and the people studying them.
I'm going to jump back to, in the similar vein of what the Yale boys have said, that like life on our planet really does kind of approximate what I would say is an ideal documentary that's a nature documentary including paleo information. Like every episode I've seen is like, in my opinion, a perfect balance of extinct and extant invertebrates, vertebrates, plants. They've talked about lichen. I was like, oh, we're going to actually acknowledge something really cool and interesting. And
they have great shots of it too.
Great shots of it, and like something that was literally fundamental to everything else on this planet. Like we needed soil in order for plants to show up, and like in order for anything else to have a chance on it, right? So like I think, and the way it's framed as well, where it's like it's really compelling. Like each episode is, in how I've interpreted it, has been like tracing the evolution of a concept of sorts. So like I think it was the second or third episode, whichever one has the big cone guys. The second one, like my interpretation of that, it was like kind of like the evolution of predation, because we're starting out with like Anomalocaris, right? And the grabby pinchers and stuff. So we're focusing on how the invertebrates are doing things, and we move on to the big cones. And then later we show the little jawless fish, and that moves to dunk, and that moves later to like amphibians. And like, it's just, I don't know. It is really close to what I would say is an ideal documentary. I think the thing that could make it better is like double the length, like spend more time on the different like craziness, but like having that framing of like, let's make sure we hit the contributions of all the major clades of life, and focus on groups that in nature documentaries, not to mention like paleo documentaries. I don't think I've seen a single paleo documentary that spends more than 5 minutes talking about plants, which is like a disgrace, because they are just as much a part of the world as everything else. So yeah, just something that is doing what life on our planet has done, just like in more detail, basically. Like I don't know, I haven't watched all the episodes. There's like 2 or 3 I haven't seen yet. But I have yet to see anything about fungi. And like, that's the other thing that is always, in my opinion, almost always missing from documentaries in general, which I think would be interesting. I know we don't know too much about them, but they're, again, another component.
It's prototype sightings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just thinking about, the scene where all the frogs are very bad at catching dragonflies.
So
very good.
It's incredible. It's so good. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
On to the next. We should probably move on.
We'll get one more, right?
Yeah,
last one.
There is one more question. Our last question comes to us from Ben. And Ben asks, what is the process like for you all working with paleo artists in your research? Now, I have not done this, so I'm just going to defer to the people who have, I know some of us very recently worked with paleo artists in our research, so have at it.
Yeah. Well, so I'm working with 2 paleo artists right now for different projects. You'll see them at some point. I don't know when, but I think you'll like what you see. For me, there's a lot of back and forth, right? Because I think a really skilled artist and somebody who really hones their craft and really does a lot of anatomical study, not only studies in the artistic sense where they draw like animals, but really like learns anatomy, as I think the best artists often do, right? That's a topic that's taught in art schools, art for artists. They can add a tremendous amount to your interpretation. So like in my work on Psittipodi osmolsky, which will be published eventually, I swear, we're just being real perfectionists about it. Mick Ellison, the senior illustrator at the AMNH, who's doing the art for all of the art for the piece, actually helped me identify some of the rib positions. All the ribs were disarticulated and they were not labeled correctly. And so, his understanding of how animal anatomy, it exists, how animals go together, he was able to lay them out all on the table and say, okay, here's the order that they must have been in. And we confirmed that with comparisons to other things. And then what I can add is, I have a lot of anatomical knowledge of the fossil record, right, in a very different context. And so we know what to look for, how to confirm our hypotheses, all of that. And when we do this kind of back and forth, we get this really, really rich image of the animal as it would have existed, right? And we combine a lot of scientific data with an artistic intuition, and it can be really, really wonderful.
Yeah, and I, having also recently worked with Henry on Jormungandr, I had a really good time because it was back and forth. Like we were helping each other to better understand what this animal would have looked like. Like that was the whole point. And when you're working with someone who really cares about what they're doing and cares about learning the anatomy, everything goes really well and smoothly for everybody involved. Yeah, and in terms of day to day, what does it physically look like? They're another collaborator technically on the work, so it's a lot of email or text communication and sending photos, sharing. I shared a lot of pictures of other mosasaurs, just so that Henry would have a better sense of what I was saying, because Yorgi was in many pieces, so it was a challenge, and I think he did it incredibly well. Because we had him do both the life reconstruction, but also the skull drawings in the paper. Again, because the skull was kind of disarticulated and scrappy in some spots. Henry did a very good job of showing what it might have looked like, just after it had died, before it was smushed and kind of altered by time.
And I think that's the last question.
Yep.
Yeah,
it is indeed.
So thank you all so much for your excellent questions.
Yes. And thank you again for your patience in this video coming out. As you know, the fall is a really difficult time for us between conferences and fundraisers. And for many of us right now, papers coming out. Amelia had Yorgi. I have so many. But they won't come out this year.
Humble brag.
No, I don't mean that in a humble brag way. I mean that in a I'm very tired way. But there's one or two big projects that I've been working on a lot, and we're all kind of busy. Dalton's got a paper dropping very soon, right?
Yes, presumably within the next 2 to 3 weeks would be my guess.
Right.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we've all been pretty busy. So we appreciate your patience with this, and I just want to reiterate. Thank you to all of our patrons whose names are scrolling in the credits right now. And a spoken thank you to these patrons who support us at the highest tiers on Patreon. And these are Benjamin Siepser, nickname 3110, Philip Fico, Andrew Niddle, Christopher Bellis-Jones, Adamolos, Dan O'Kyrus, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, original username, Pythonic, SwampApe Science, and Wheat.
Praise be to Wheat.
Praise be to Wheat. Thank you all so much for your support of the Skeleton Crew and everything. We will have the Q&A videos coming out more regularly in the future, so please never fear. And submit your questions if you haven't already for the November Q&A. And
Look forward to hearing them.
Be doing soon. Yeah, we're looking forward to answering everybody. And
I
a
love
note,
these.
just in the future, if we get enough patrons that we can't answer all of your questions in one video, never fear. We will try to pick ones we haven't answered on camera before, but we will comment answers to your questions in our Discord. So you will not lack an answer, but we may have to start eventually kind of choosing a subset to answer just for time reasons. This video took a long time to record. Anyway, take it easy, everybody. Thank you for watching. And remember to like and subscribe.